Okay, I know I said no new videos in July. I'm really busy right now. I'm moving from one city to another, and I'm getting ready to start a second master's degree program, so yeah, I really don't have a huge amount of free time at the moment, but I'm gonna make an exception because we need to talk about the new Taylor Swift album. Specifically, I want to talk about two of the songs and how they remind me of Shakespeare. Now, literary allusions are really nothing new for Taylor Swift. In fact, the song Love Story from the album Fearless is just one big Shakespeare allusion. You were Romeo, you were throwing pebbles, my daddy said stay away from Juliet. Yeah, it's basically the story of Romeo and Juliet. And I've talked about that before. In fact, I've made several videos about Taylor Swift songs that remind me of characters from literature. And as I was listening to Speak Now, Taylor's version, on repeat all this past weekend and into this week, it occurred to me that a couple of the From the Vault tracks reminded me a whole lot of Shakespeare. So let's start with Timeless, because that's by far the easier of the two to break down why exactly it reminds me of Shakespeare. Timeless is a song about a woman in the present day who's imagining that her relationship would have happened no matter what time period they were born in. So it references several periods in history. Some of them are more modern, but there's one that's clearly Shakespeare, and clearly Romeo and Juliet. Listen to this. That's when I came upon a book covered in cobwebs, story of a romance torn apart by fate. Hundreds of years ago they fell in love like we did, and I'd die for you in the same way if I first saw your face in the 1500s off in a foreign land, and I was forced to marry another man. You still would have been mine, we would have been timeless. I would have read your love letters every single night, and run away and left it all behind. You still would have been mine, we would have been timeless. What I find really interesting about this, though, is that not only is it a Romeo and Juliet allusion, it's also a reference to her song Love Story. As in, the ending is a little bit more optimistic. Yes, there's that line about I would have died for you and whatnot, and that references the tragic ending of the original Romeo and Juliet. But then the chorus of Love Story, which is also based on Romeo and Juliet, is Romeo, take me somewhere we can be alone. I'll be waiting. All that's left to do is run. You'll be the prince and I'll be the princess. It's a love story. Baby, just say yes. Which implies running away together. And of course, they attempt that in the play as well. But in Love Story, it gets a happy ending. So I think that reference there, it's really interesting the way that it avoids making the song take too dark of a turn, because all of the other examples of, if we had met in the past are very positive. It's like the idea that they would have overcome hardship together, but eventually had a happy ending. Even the one that takes place during World War II has him coming home safely at the end. Anyway, so that's the straightforward Shakespeare allusion. There's another song, though, that it's not so much that I think it was intentionally based on or inspired by one of Shakespeare's plays, it just fits it really well. And that is Castles Crumbling, which makes me think so much of King Lear. Now, it probably doesn't hurt that I actually went to see a live production of King Lear not that long ago, and so I kind of had it on my mind. But also, I think some of the lyrics just line up so well. Okay, listen to this. Once I had an empire in a golden age. I was held up so high, I used to be great. They used to cheer when they saw my face. Now I fear I have fallen from grace. Okay, so that could actually apply to the character of King Lear himself, because he definitely had an empire that kind of fell all around him. But then I think it's also incredibly fitting for Cordelia and Edgar, who are the good, loyal, and underappreciated children who really get the short end of the stick. Cordelia is King Lear's youngest daughter, and she's actually initially his favorite. However, when he asks them to proclaim their love for him, in order to decide which one of them will get the best part of his kingdom as their inheritance, she doesn't lie and the others do. She is just like, I love you like a daughter should love her father, and I'll also love my husband when I marry him, and my sisters, by the way, are totally lying. Whereas the sisters are like, I'm an enemy to all other emotion, and I love you more than life. And they really don't. They really, really don't, and that becomes very obvious over the course of the play. So Cordelia initially being the favorite, but then falling from grace because she's truthful where other people tell flattering lies. I think the idea of, I was held up so high, now I fear I have fallen from grace, I think that describes her really well. And the same thing really applies to Edgar, who is one of the two sons of a duke. And he's the only legitimate heir. In other words, he's the child of that duke and his wife. whereas his brother Edmund was born to a woman that their father was not married to. Edgar is a totally loyal and devoted son, and having been brought up alongside his half-brother Edmund, also trusts his brother very deeply, which is really a mistake because Edmund is not a good guy and is scheming against him. Okay, so it gets even better though. Let's look at the second verse. Once I was the great hope for a dynasty. Crowds would hang on my words, and they trusted me. Their faith was strong, but I pushed it too far. I held that grudge till it tore me apart. Power went to my head, and I couldn't stop. Ones I loved tried to help, so I ran them off. And here I sit alone, behind walls of regret, falling down like promises that I never kept. Okay, so some of that actually reminds me again of King Lear himself, particularly the line about ones I loved tried to help, so I ran them off, because that's exactly what King Lear does. He sends his youngest and only loyal and loving daughter into exile. He also banishes Kent, who's one of the few members of his court who is willing to tell him he's making a big mistake. And ultimately, he ends up really regretting which people he trusted and which people he pushed away. However, overall, this second verse reminds me so much of the villains of the play. Goneril, Regan, and Edmund. They trusted me, I pushed it too far, power went to my head. Particularly the line about promises that I never kept, because that is one of the big things that the villains of King Lear do, is they break promises. King Lear's two eldest daughters make all kinds of promises about how much they love him and honor him, and then when it comes down to it, they're terrible to him. And Edmund likewise has the trust of his father and his brother and uses it to manipulate them and pit them against each other. And then, as one might expect, the play does not end well for these characters. I mean, it's a Shakespearean tragedy. It doesn't end well for pretty much anybody. So that line about falling down like promises that I never kept, yeah, it all does kind of fall down at the end. And then the third verse, the part that begins, my foes and friends watch my reign end. I don't know how it could have ended this way. My goodness, that whole section is like, it sounds like it's about the battle at the end. Like, it really does. And then the chorus, which keeps repeating throughout the song, talks about castles crumbling and bridges burning, and it has the line, you don't want to know me now, which, I mean, the whole play is basically about people who were very close and were family and should have been there for each other, who turn against each other and don't want to know each other anymore. Except Cordelia and Edgar, they still are there for their parents, even when their parents kind of mess up. Anyway, so I don't think that the song was like literally based on King Lear, but I do think it's really interesting the number of parallels that I was able to find and the number of lyrics that suit either the story as a whole or specific characters in the story really well. Anyway, so like I said, this is not a return to the normal 2 videos a week kind of thing. In fact, I'm thinking that probably when I come back on a regular basis in August, it'll be more like 1 video a week. But I just wanted to share my thoughts on this while the Speak Now Taylor's Version album is new and while it's still all, fresh in my mind from first noticing it. If you liked this video and you want to see more from me, be sure to subscribe. I'll be back in August and I hope to see you then.